talking.
Douglas, you're muted right now. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry, it won't let me pin Mark. I got the little 4X and it won't let me on the screen, but I cannot it won't go away. Let me try again. It's still there. They got the little thing. They have a smaller, a medium size, and a tall and a flat thing. So I don't know what I'm changing on. So where is this? You know what? I'm gonna go to my phone, and I'm gonna do that. Okay. Maybe I'm gonna be back. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
It looks like we are recording live on Facebook and recording, so that's all happening. Thank you. And so for those of you that are just joining us, thank you again for joining us. We are just working through a couple technical clarity details for our interpretation for ASL. So just bear with us for 1 or 2 more minutes while we figure that out, and then we will get started with Stockton CSC meeting number 9. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay.
While we are waiting, one thing you should see on your screens right now is the way to rename yourself. Many of you are not new to this system and have probably been to a few of our meetings already. So if you wouldn't mind, please use the same structure and naming convention we have for our previous meetings, which is affiliation - first name and then last name so that we know who's on the line. And then you will note throughout the meeting that the ILG team will actually be adding R to your name if you're a resident as well. We've heard from you that you'd love to know who the residents are on these calls too. And so we're going to do that for everyone's benefit in addition to how we track stipends. If you know that you're a resident, feel free to add your name, an R before your name as well, and we'll validate those that maybe aren't sure which category of CSC member they are. And we'll just wait for Doug to log on by phone. It looks like he's got the phone hooked up, and he will.
I can see now. So everything's fine. I can see Mark right now. So great. Okay, thank you for being patient.
You are
everyone.
welcome. Thank you. So Douglas is on twice, and I think Mark, looks like we're good with you. Anyone else have any other technical difficulties we want to work through before we get started?
Aquí a la mesa porque estaba comiendo. Él se vino para acá porque se le estaba comiendo cuando le llamaron la cosa.
I hear someone speaking in Spanish, and I'm not sure if that was intended to be out loud or on mute. If we do have any challenges with Spanish language, we're happy to help that in advance of beginning the meeting. All right, well, hearing none, we will go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to everyone. My name is Erica Manuel. I'm on the facilitation team and the CEO of the Institute for Local Government. I have been a part of these calls and meetings for a while, but Hannah has led most of the Stockton committee meetings up until now. And so we're switching gears today, and I'm going to take on this special meeting. But Hannah and Kim are still here on the line. Kim and Hannah are waving and or speaking right now so that you can hear them. This is the facilitation team for tonight. We are here to help you with any problems you might have throughout the meeting, and we'll be facilitating this conversation to make sure that there's some neutral discussion and that we're able to capture community voices and your priorities as we develop the emissions reduction plan for Stockton. So this is a special additional meeting because there are so many important items to discuss related to your community, and it feels like we've just got a lot happening in this fall timeline. And so we've added an additional meeting in October, and our main topic really is to discuss the development, the prioritization, and discussing the search strategies. But we do have a few other agenda items as well, and we wanted to show you what is on that agenda today so that you can make some decisions about how you want to prioritize tonight. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to hear from your community co-host, who is Mary Elizabeth. She's going to share about some of the work that's being done that the Delta Sierra group does in the Stockton community. And then we're going to hear from Jeff Wingfield on the Port of Stockton. And then after Jeff's presentation, Renee Gutierrez with the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission is going to talk very, very briefly, just some primer information about the Stockton Diamond Grade Separation Project. Just some basics that you need to know, some key details, not a full presentation, but just a real quick overview. And then we're going to hand it over to Carr briefly to update this committee on the regulation timeline. And then we're going to talk about the draft CERT measures. And we're going to give that the majority of the time for this agenda, so that you have a little bit more time to work as a group on that CERT and the measures in there and the prioritization of those measures. There is going to be a working portion of this meeting, and the Air District's going to take lots of notes. And CSC members, thanks to those of you that have already provided feedback to the Air District, you can certainly weigh in again if you've already sent in information. But those of you that haven't, this is a great time to give direct input into the CERT strategies document and ask questions if you have them. We're gaining a lot of momentum on this process, and I know that a lot of you feel like there's a lot coming at you, and so this meeting is an opportunity for you to have additional time to think about the concepts, to ask questions, discuss solutions, flag concerns, whatever you need. And this agenda covers actually quite a few important topics, and we want you to feel like you're prioritizing the topics that are important to you tonight, so we're going to be flexible. This agenda right here says what times every item is going to cover, which things, and we want to adhere to that, but at the same time, we want you to know that we'll be flexible with you. So if we run long in one area, we may need to make up for it somewhere else on that agenda. And we just want you to be mindful in advance that we're going to try and be as flexible as possible, and hopefully you will too. And if we need to stay a little long to cover some of those agenda items that are important to you, we will do that tonight. So now I'm going to turn it over to Hannah for some Zoom control reminders, and then we'll pop back over for our co-host and host welcome.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, very briefly, because most of you already know how to use the Zoom controls. Please stay on mute unless you're planning to speak. You've noticed that sometimes we're muting you automatically because you unmute yourself accidentally and there's some background noise. If you're planning to speak, please raise your blue hand so we know how many people are planning to ask questions and participate, so we can better manage the time and the queue. Please use the chat box to communicate your questions, suggestions. The Air District and other folks have been pretty good at answering a lot of questions. I know this chat can be very busy, and we'll do our best to keep up with all the questions and suggestions. And the chat is posted online on the website if you haven't had a chance to check it out. Just a friendly reminder, the chat is not completely private, even though you can use the private communication function. The final chat transcript reflects all communication. Finally, if you're joining us on your phone for your audio and on the computer for your video, we want to make sure that you link those two accounts so we see you in a participant box as one person who participates. And to link your accounts on your phone, you press a pound key and then you type your participant ID. And your participant ID is going to be on your computer screen or your phone screen in the left upper corner. There's a little blue kind of like shield looking, little green shield looking sign. That's it for controls. I'm going to circle back with my colleague Kim to ensure that we got people who are on the phone and we know who we are. So we keep track of all the participants for the roll call and for the stipends. Kim, do we need to rename any folks who are on the phone?
Thanks, Hannah. I am actually showing that we've got everyone labeled right now.
Excellent. So we're all set. And a friendly reminder for members of the public, thank you so much for joining us. Please share your comments on the Facebook if you're joining us via the Facebook. And you can also email at ab617@valleyair.org. And at the end of the meeting, we will have public comment period. Back to Erica.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we do have a very strong and full agenda today, so we want to make sure to give you as much time as possible. We are slated to end at 7, but Carb and Valley Air District members are always happy to stay online a little bit longer, and if we need to run long to cover everything today, we will absolutely do that for as long as we can, about 15 minutes potentially if we needed to. We are skipping that verbal roll call, but for those of you that are members of or have signed up as resident members and are eligible and have signed up for the stipend program, just remember that your screen name reflects your attendance, and you need to stay on this line for 75% of this meeting to get credit for this meeting and the stipend reimbursement for it. So we'll, again, stay on the line later today if we need to begin and to answer any questions about the stipend program. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our welcomes from our host and our community co-host. I will start with handing it over to Ryan, who is with the Air District. And then Ryan, if you'll hand it over to Mary Elizabeth, we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. I'll keep this super short. Just want to thank everybody. I know these additional meetings, it's a lot of work and commitment that you've already put in, and this is just on top of that. So I think we're just getting closer to that finish line. I just appreciate everybody's willingness to continue to work on this, and definitely want to thank Mary and Elizabeth and Jeff Wingfield for their volunteering to participate, update to the committee at the request of the committee, and so looking forward to tonight's discussion and meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. Mary Elizabeth, would you like, and if you would like to give your community co-host welcome and then dovetail right into your presentation, that would be perfect. You're actually on mute at the moment. Can you? We should be.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone being here, and I also appreciate the work that is being done by both the Valley Air District and CARB to help our community become more organized and share this very important information. So I think I'll go ahead and get started.
Fantastic. And while Mary Elizabeth is pulling up the presentation, there is one announcement you all should know. We are celebrating a birthday today, and she might be quiet about it, but Jamie is celebrating a birthday today, and we should make sure to, number one, be incredibly nice to her, but number two, maybe use a reaction or something to say happy birthday or put it in the chat so that she knows that we are honored to celebrate her birthday at a CSC meeting for the next couple of hours. So happy birthday, Jamie.
That is real dedication.
True dedication.
Yes. My name is Mary Elizabeth, and I was asked to first put together a presentation on a different topic, and the topic kind of expanded a little bit. So I'm going to, I put a lot of informational links in the presentation for anyone that's interested in following up. I'd like to acknowledge that I prepared this presentation while I was on Northern Yokut land. And I put a link here if you want to learn more about the Northern Yokut that lived in Stockton and currently still do. So my presentation is about the Sierra Club. And so this is, we have several different layers of organization. We have our national club that has 3 governing bodies. So we have our membership elected board of directors, and we have currently about 3.8 million members. And then they hire our executive director, which is Michael Broom, and he has an executive team that works on keeping everybody together and communicating all that everyone is doing. In California, because we have a geographic diversity as well as a very, very large membership numbers, we have a statewide organization. It's called Sierra Club California. Not all states have them. Sierra Club California works on our statewide issues, and we are fortunate to have Eric Parfrey, who is an alternate and an AB 617 resident. He is currently chair of the Sierra Club California Executive Committee. The next level of organization are the chapters. So in California, we have 13 chapters. Let me move, I've got to move this panel here. Actually, I think I'm gonna, there we go. Our chapter is the Motherlode chapter. And so this is the area that our chapter encompasses. And then the final level, the most local level of the Sierra Club are the groups. And our group is the Delta Sierra group, and it encompasses all of San Joaquin County. So the Delta Sierra Group also has an executive committee, and it's elected by the members. We have about 870 that are living in San Joaquin County. Two of our members, our executive committee members, are also AB 617 residents. We have Margot Prouse and myself. And the Delta Sierra Group is involved with several conservation areas involving land, air, and water resources. And so here's Margot presenting to the City Council. And also I'd like to acknowledge the important part of our club is interacting with our environment directly through recreational or conservation activities. Our outings program is currently on hold, but we have some pilots going on to see how we can have outdoor activities as a group safely. So our areas that we work mostly on is water resources, air, transportation, and land resources. And so you'll see my name a lot here. That's because for a time I left Stockton and I went to graduate school at UC Davis, and I have a master's degree in hydrologic science. So I'm pretty much mostly a water girl, but am getting more and more involved in other areas. So I worked on the groundwater sustainability planning. I was a member of the stakeholders group. I'm a member of the coordinating committee. Margot is an alternate for the integrated regional water management planning. I'm on the City of Stockton Water Advisory Group and the San Joaquin County Advisory Water Commission. So in the air areas, transportation and land resources, we have Paul Plath, who is a local group member, and he is on the Council of Government Citizens Advisory Commission. He's also taking care of our Stockton grade separation stakeholders group, and I'm an alternate on that. And then we have Ned here, who is also a, I've got to move this here. Sorry, let me just, there, who's also a member of the AB 617 and a resident. And I put a link here. San Joaquin County is actively recruiting for an alternate for that position. And if you are at all interested in getting involved with the district level and advisory commission group organizations, please, I would encourage you to apply for that position. Your work here is definitely very valuable and can be extended with participation at that district level. So in terms of housing, we provided comments and worked on the consolidated housing plan. So I put a link here for our comments. Also, Sierra Club California has a housing policy because we believe that we can create housing opportunities and protect the environment at the same time. And I put a link to that information there. One of the latest land use projects that we worked on was the Sanchez-Hogan annexation project. It was a huge warehousing trucking project in Southeast Stockton. And I was not able to provide any comments during the EIR, the draft process, but did provide comments for the final and the planning commission. And I provided those comments there. I would like to have a shout out to the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, CARB, and the California Department of Justice. Their intervention, helped make that project have more mitigation and lessen the impact that it will have on the residents living in that area. So thank you. So this is some of our groundwater work. We were one of the few non-governmental organizations that monitored and participated throughout the development of the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And I put a diagram here to show you what groundwater is, because you might not, think about it too much, but most all of our water that we get here in San Joaquin County in different parts comes primarily from groundwater. And so that involves a well. And that well, you dig down deep enough and you'll start to get into a saturated area where you have some groundwater that flows into the well. If you're pumping out more water then is being infiltrated, this groundwater table decreases. In San Joaquin County, it has decreased to such a level that we are now considered critically overdrafted, which is why we needed to create this sustainability plan. So I put a link here. These are where all the comments can be found regarding the Eastern San Joaquin final GSP, and including ours, as well as some of our NGO partners. So we're also working on the integrated regional water management plan update. So they're creating an addendum. So this is the greater San Joaquin area, planning area. And so this area that has the little dots, this is the planning area that is under consideration at this time. We were very fortunate to obtain a grant to develop a disadvantaged community task force that was that has been working, and they have selected projects out of the project list that they feel are most important to benefit the disadvantaged community. And it's our job then, as also DAC partners, to advocate that their wishes are honored. And this is a link here to the Regional Water Management Coordinating Committee website. And so that's where you're going to find all the information about the Integrated Regional Water Management Planning. And then here are some comments on an internal draft that is public information. So we're also involved in the dredging project, and this started late last year with some work in the Bay Area. And so this is called the San Francisco to Stockton Navigational Study, and it involves increased dredging. The original study included dredging all the way to Stockton. So the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the governmental organization that is doing this environmental analysis and will be, doing all of the contracting work, they found that this area from this point to Stockton had a greater cost than benefit, 4-to-1. And so this part of the project is on hold, hopefully indefinitely. This part of the project that the Port of Stockton is still the local sponsor to is in the EIS review process, which is what they call environmental impact reports for the federal government. And so these are our comments that we partnered with Restore the Delta and California Sports Fishing Alliance. And then here's some comments from our national club as well as other groups. So the Delta Tunnel, we provide some comments on the notice of preparation for the Delta Tunnel, and which I have not included here, but you can find on our website. This is the latest survey that is being circulated, and I encourage you to go back and complete this survey, particularly because we will be impacted. So this is the Delta Sierra Group port work. So I learned about the port as a small child from my grandfather. So this is my grandfather here. He's was a retired longshoreman. He's passed now. And my environmental awakening occurred while I was working as a quality control chemist for McCormick and Baxter Creosote and Company that is located on Washington Avenue, but now is just an empty lot. And as a result of that awakening, I switched careers and became a registered environmental health specialist working on environmental cleanup sites. So fast forward 15 years and I'm back in Stockton now, and I'm wondering what's going on, but there's no port minutes. So then the Delta Sierra Group, the Motherlode chapter, the Redwood chapter, and the Bay chapter began talking about hiring a coal organizer. First, we had Tara Lynn Chin, and now we have Jacob Klein. And my commitment to the cause was to go to each meeting and to provide minutes. And so here you see, this is on the east side of the port, and this is where they have coal stockpiled. And so coal comes in by rail and then goes out by ship, So this is the coal stockpiles. So a part of the coal work is providing documentation. So I have quite a bit of information, historical information on the Port of Stockton overview historic document webpage. And one of our main concerns is toxic coal dust. So up until 2011, there was very little coal that was shipped out. But then as a result of this rail project, the coal increased dramatically to a max of 2.3 million tons of coal in 2014. The coal comes from Utah mines. So the first project since I've been working on the port that has gone through to the end is the New Star Marine Terminal. And it was approved by the Port Commissioners in April 2020. So these were our draft environmental impact report comments that we submitted back in January. And this is a table from that document. And you can see that existing truck traffic one way on an annual basis before the project is 17,000. After the project, the implementation of the project, the amount of truck traffic is going to increase greatly. Rail traffic will increase greatly, as well as ship calls. I put a picture here. These were some of our partners that I began working with as a result of the dredging work that we're doing, that the Port of Stockton is the local sponsor. The New Star final EIR was not made available until after the Port of Stockton Commission adopted, and it was only available upon release of a public information request. And that public information request was made before the final. The requirement that the Port of Stockton made for any comments is to be 250 words or less. The next project that is currently under consideration is the Lehigh Cement. We provided comments on the notice of preparation back in November. The draft environmental impact report. This is the Lehigh terminal area where ships will come in. Here we have some cement out here. According to port staff, the Lehigh health risk assessment is to be underway soon. So it was not part of the draft EIR, but will be included in a final EIR that is due in 2021. Because we were very concerned about the way the New Star project went in terms of its availability, its the whole process in regards to its adoption. Ourselves, along with the Motherlode chapter, partnered, and we hired an attorney to look over our documents. This is a copy of the attorney's letter in regard to the draft environmental impact report and some other issues that came to light. This is another project underway. This is one that I find hard to believe. This is cottonseed. It comes in from rail and goes out by truck. This is all open stockpile. According to port staff, final EIS, and these were the comments on the draft initial study, mitigated negative declaration. That's what that stands for. And it's anticipated to be completed late this year. What's amazing to me is that it's operational without seemingly permits, because that's what's going to be included in this process here, as well as a lease by the port. Right over in this area of the property is some open land that we have suggested be a vegetative barrier to prevent the transport of fugitive dust from the site. An item agenda that came up yesterday, and I tell you, living and learning, and I'm glad to see the Council of Governments is here because I certainly learned something about the congestion management plan. There were like 3 different layers of definitions for a categorical exemption. And so the port has approved this project with apparently no environmental impact analysis that was released. A $12 million project, a road project. And we will be submitting a public information request for a documentation to assure that any necessary mitigations are employed during that project. I was asked to speak about harmful algal blooms and the air pollution effects. So I've included 3 links here. So one is from the Center for Disease Control, and then 2 short studies that are fairly easy to read, demonstrating that in fact, those algal blooms can become airborne and do cause a health concern. I'm kind of a bit of a microbe nerd. I have an undergraduate degree in microbiology, so I just love to say this word, archaebacteria. Those were the first kinds of organisms that are documented to have lived on our planet Earth. The only mitigation that I was able to find other than, cleaning up the air or cleaning up the water nutrient levels was to increase aeration. And I believe the city of Stockton and the port of Stockton have aerators that are involved in oxygenation as well as causing some disturbances. So one of the issues that allows this, besides our issue of warm water, is calm waters. And please, 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 if you are interested at all in any algal bloom information or and you want to find out some more information, please visit the Restore the Delta website. They do a tremendous job, and I'm so thankful that they are here in our community. So we recently, as a Sierra Club, have acknowledged that our founder has not always been as enlightened as he was in his last year. So we have some active Sierra Club educational events that we are working on to help educate all of our members about, some of those past ideas and how we can be a better advocate for equality. So we have this, this is just recently starting up here. You can click this link if you're interested in finding out more about what we're doing. These are also 2 links here. This is a picture from this second article here that I would encourage you to read if you're interested in the connection between racial equality and environmental justice. Finally, last summer, I had an opportunity to take a ride. I went to the port to look at a public notice on their window, and I noticed that there was some new construction. So I went out and I took some pictures, and this is Harbor Avenue here going into the eastern entrance. And all of this area here, which you can't see, I'm not the best photographer, but these are all trucks that are lined up, many of which were idling, waiting to get into the port. And this is a home right across the street. So right in.
Did we lose Mary Elizabeth?
I think so.
My goodness. I think she was starting to close down her presentation. We'll give her a couple seconds to get back on or get her connection back. But what I can tell you is that the Air District does have a copy of this presentation, and we'll be getting an updated version of that to the website. So there are lots of links in this, as you can hear and see. And so we'll do our best to make sure those have them.
It's already been posted to the website.
Yes, perfect. She did mention she had a couple changes she wanted to make, and so she might be posting a new one. But that version I think that's up there is certainly good as well. And then Mary Elizabeth may have an updated version too. What I would recommend though is, because we cannot see her at the moment, that if you had questions for Mary Elizabeth or comments about her presentation, please put those in the chat. She definitely deserves a virtual round of applause. It was a fantastic and very comprehensive conversation about the work that the Delta Sierra group is doing on conservation, specifically in Stockton and around the port and other areas, which is a really good segue into our next presentation, which is the Port of Stockton, and Jeff Wingfield providing that update. So not seeing Mary right now, let us continue moving forward. Put your comments for Mary Elizabeth and questions in the chat, and I will graciously turn it over to Jeff to talk about the Port of Stockton and have a conversation there. Jeff, if you're able to unmute and are ready, you're on.
Erica and Jeff, sorry, can I quickly interrupt? I have one number that is unlabeled on the participants list, and I just want to make sure that we identify that person. The last 4 digits are 8922. If you could just
we have a cell phone number. 8922. If you could unmute yourself, we want to make sure you get credit for being here if you are a CSC resident member. And Jeff, feel free to load up your presentation while we're trying to hear if you have one.
I do.
Go right ahead. That person may not be able to unmute. What we will say is, for that phone number that's got the last 4 digits of 8922, at any time, go ahead and send us a chat directly. If you can't do that on phone, we'll try and continue to get you throughout the meeting. So we're happy that you're here, and if you are a resident, we'll make sure to get you renamed before the end of the meeting. Jeff, take it away.
Great, thank you. You guys can see that okay?
Yes.
Great, okay. Thank you, everybody. It's been an honor to be on this working group and to sit in and learn from everything that you guys are sharing. And I've been at the port for about 15 years. It's been amazing to see kind of what we've been able to do at the port, obviously the addition of Rough and Ready Island. And I just felt like I really needed to share with you all kind of what we're doing. So, you guys can see my screen okay? I'm having a little bit of a trouble over here.
Yeah, it's pretty clear on our end.
Okay. Okay. So just a little bit of background about the port. We are a state agency, a port district. We were founded by the Harbors and Navigation Code under the state. We do not receive any tax dollars whatsoever. We have to operate like a business and all of our money is generated by either leases or by wharfage and ships coming to the port. So we are obviously situated at the hub of a lot of different transportation corridors, including the Federal Ship Channel, I-5, that's the major north-south intersection on the western United States, running all the way from Mexico to Canada. You've got 99, which goes up and down California, as well as Crosstown Highway 4. And then you've got continued freeways to the Bay Area. We're also in a very unique location where you've got BNSF and the Union Pacific Railways crossing very near the port. And so we are served by both the Union Pacific and BNSF Railways, which helps us to be competitive. I did want to just mention very briefly, there are 11 public ports in California. The ones you've probably heard about most are the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, which are huge port complexes, top 10 in the world. And then you've got Port of Oakland, who is also does a great deal of containers, almost all of the containers in Northern California. The Port of Stockton, we do not do containers. Those other two ports are primarily container ports, very high value cargo. Stockton, we are mainly engaged in doing construction materials and agricultural products, mainly non-containerized. So it's either in big bags, which we call break bulk, or in the ship's hull, which we call bulk shipping. The other reason why I wanted to bring up Port of LA and Long Beach is that even though, so I'm actually proud to say that the Port of Stockton is 4th busiest in the state, which is quite an accomplishment since we are so far inland, 75 miles exactly from the Golden Gate Bridge, and we've got to try to compete with a lot of ports that are right on the ocean. So it's about an 8-hour transit from the Golden Gate Bridge up to Stockton. A lot of people ask that, so I thought I'd throw that in. But the other thing, I did some research, and so our budgets annually are around $60 million. And just to put that into perspective, and I'm not crying about that, I'm saying that the Port of Long Beach budget is $650 million, and the Port of Los Angeles was $1.5 billion, and the Port of Oakland is roughly $400 to $500 million. So just to put things in perspective, we like to say we're number 4, but we are really in the, we consider Oakland, Long Beach, and LA as kind of varsity, and we're kind of on the freshman team for, to put it in terms of high school sports. Recently, we got a letter from CARB where they were concerned about our impacts to the neighboring communities, and I do want to emphasize that the port also shares that value in making sure that we can do business without impacting the neighboring community. And I kind of wanted to walk through a few things that we've done so far, and then some additional measures we're going to implement very shortly to kind of talk about that. So one of the things we're doing is identifying and reducing environmental impacts from our operations. Mary Elizabeth talked about our CEQA process, although she had some things to say. We are trying to follow the law and go through all the appropriate CEQA processes that apply to port projects. Going beyond that, we've also recently just started doing health risk assessments for all projects as part of our CEQA process. One thing that we are going to start to get better at, which I will admit we have not been probably the best at, is engaging with the immediate community. But we have been promoting a lot of community engagement and education, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. Obviously, providing economic opportunities is why the port was created. We currently do support over 10,000 jobs, which helps to keep this area moving and keep money flowing into the area. And so I'll work into a kind of things that we're currently doing. One of the things we're really doing, we're developing plans and strategies to reduce emissions. One of the things that we've started in the past 6 months is we are conducting, for the first time, a port-wide emission inventory. That will help us to kind of identify measures the port can take to reduce emissions moving forward, whether it be project-related or just with our current operations. So that is something that we have hired Starcrest Consulting, who has done a number of emission inventories, not only in California, but throughout the world. They are one of the premier consultants as far as doing those types of projects. And so we are working currently. We've developed a technical working group. We're in our fact gathering and working with our tenants right now to get the information, and we think that will probably be completed around the first quarter of 2021. Let me move ahead. So one of the things that we're actually currently doing as well is retrofitting and replacing our current cargo handling fleet. When I got here, our fleet was in pretty bad shape, and in fact, for a number of years, we were having to rent some equipment. And then we started retrofitting a lot of it with the VDEX, the emission reduction stacks on our equipment, and they just started getting less and less operational. We've had to shut them down to regenerate for a good amount of time, and it was really becoming inefficient. And so I started working with our operations team as we started looking into getting new equipment, and we started trying to test the waters for what we could implement that was zero emission. So we kind of dipped our toes in a little bit with the first two, and we added the use of these Danner mobile power sources, which I will share a picture of them in just a minute. These are zero emission units. They're forklifts, and we have fitted one of them with a scissor lift and another one with a dump bed. And we think these are really kind of probably more cut out for the agriculture community, but we were willing to test them here at the port. We've been trying to fine tune them for about a year, and we think we've got them working okay to put them into demonstration use against some of our rebar products. That got our board and all of us thinking a little bit more about how we could implement these things. We started with 2 charging units, and then we partnered with the ports of Oakland and Long Beach to go into a large grant. It's called a ZANZEF grant. It's a zero and near zero emission freight facility program. And through that, the port was able to partner with one of our stevedoring companies, which was SSA, to acquire 34 zero-emission forklifts. I think the port's going to get 12 heavy-duty 30,000-ton forklifts, as well as 8 smaller 8,000-ton units, as well as a zero-emission rail car mover. So we have started receiving that information or that equipment. I want to say right now we've got about 10 overall. One of the things that really wasn't, we didn't understand kind of how difficult it was going to be was to put in all of the infrastructure that was needed to charge these units. So we're actually in the process of working with PG&E, as well as the port is the electric utility on the West Complex. And so we are in the process of getting all of that infrastructure in to be able to charge these units. The port responsible areas are about 95% done. We had to wait a little bit longer for PG&E, and so I think we're about 70% done on installing the charging units for those forklifts as well. One of the other things that we've done over the past 3 years now is we've joined the Green Marine program. It's an environmental program. It's a third-party. Let me show you some images of the. These are some of our newer equipment. This is a 30,000-pound Wiggins bowl, all electric on the right, and an 8,000-pound World Lift on the left. One of the things we were a little bit concerned about initially was labor and how they were going to, if these were going to be difficult to operate or more challenging to operate, and how they would take to them. But Longshore has so far really taken to these and really appreciated operating them. And we're working out a few little kinks here and there, but for the most part, we're really pleased with how everything is going. Here's some of the cool looking chargers that we've put in. They're inside. Unfortunately, we haven't had a public event where we've been able to kind of show the world what these things look like, but they're very high tech, especially for the port. We are a fairly low tech operation, and some of these chargers have really kind of helped us move into the next wave. And so we're installing approximately 30 of these all throughout the port. These happen to be inside, but not all of them are. And then these are the 2 units I was mentioning previously. They kind of look like Mars rovers, but they are 2 zero-emission forklifts, and you can see the scissor lift on the left and the dump bed on the right. And we are, as I mentioned, we're currently testing them against cargo, but we probably think they're going to be more in line with being a utility vehicle or something like that for our maintenance department in the long run, but we'll see how they end up working out. Oh, one other thing that I haven't had a chance to talk about much is, so we are also looking at different hydrogen-powered technology. This was a demonstration unit that we had the opportunity to utilize a couple of years back. We were only able to use it for a couple of weeks, and this was at a time, you see a container here, so this was at a time when we were doing containers. But this is something that we are revisiting now, and I actually have a group who is kind of going through and looking at all the technology and what what equipment what technology makes the best sense for which equipment that we want to go and implement here at the port. But this was a pretty cool operation. We just haven't had a chance to develop more than the demonstration here. One of the other things that I mentioned in my response back to Carb, I don't know, I think a number of you probably saw that response, but we really think that there's an opportunity to do more outreach amongst our tenant group. So that you're aware, the port, we are an operation. The port itself has a very small fertilizer operation, but we have approximately 130 tenants that we oversee, and we kind of operate like our own city, with the port providing oversight for whether it be dust or stormwater, air emissions. The port provides that oversight, and we have our own internal group that does that here. But one of the things, when I mentioned that we partnered with SSA on that ZANZEF grant, we reached out initially to our other two stevedoring units, and we didn't get a lot of response. And I think the reason was everybody was a little concerned. The technology was a little bit green. Folks didn't really want to risk money. That was a problem for our commission as well. The ZANZEF project that we committed to was the $2 million out of port cash, which was that's a huge budget item for us. When we got $40 to $50 million for the whole year, $2 million is a lot. Although we ended up getting, because of the grant, we were able to get about $10 million worth of equipment. But so some of the groups, we didn't get a chance to reach out to everybody. And so I've been talking to a number of our tenants now, and they see kind of the success we've been having with the ZANZEF opportunity. And so we're going to form kind of a core group to share ideas. One of the ideas that came up just from initial discussions was, the port exports a lot of rice, and could we electrify the trucking fleet that exports rice that runs back and forth between Stockton and North Sacramento area? And so those are the types of things that we're hoping that will, we kind of anticipated being kind of a brainstorm group to try to figure out different ways we could partner, grant opportunities to go after, and ways that we can reduce emissions and probably save money at the same time. So that's our first group, is our internal tenant group, to talk about the information gaps, opportunities, and collaboration. Second group that I think is a long time coming is forming a community group where we can run projects, we can put our projects on the table, get feedback from the neighbors, the local EJ groups, find out what your concerns are, find out ways that we can improve our operations and things that we can do to minimize impacts to the community. The port, we do care about that type of thing, and we're very interested in working collaboratively to figure out ways to move more cargo and to do it without impacting the community. A number of things that we've been doing recently are infrastructure improvements. As Mary mentioned yesterday, we approved a 5th grade separation, and that is to free up a corridor where we've got rail intersecting with our major access point to the West Complex. And so you get trucks and you get cars queuing up and lining up behind rail, and so it's a real issue for air impacts as well as safety. So that grade separation project will help things. We've just replaced one of our major bridges, our access to the West Complex. And one of the things that really kind of spurred a lot of this was our partnership with COG and Caltrans to extend the Highway 4, which enabled us to get a lot of the traffic out of the Boggs Trap community, and so you didn't have a lot of traffic coming up Fresno. That traffic now flows pretty easily onto Navy and bypasses going through that neighborhood, which we value. Mentioned previously the Green Marine certification. I'll try to go quick. I feel like I'm running behind a little bit, but so the port, Stockton was the second port in California that was able to be Green Marine certified, and what that is a program. You can go online and look it up, but it's a third party that comes in and evaluates all of your operations, whether it's your bulk handling, your community impacts, waste management, your air pollution, and then they have a consultant that comes in and sits down for 3 days, goes through all of your programs, and you have to meet a certain criteria to certify, and then every year you have to improve upon those to stay in the program. And so I'm proud to say that we were the second port that qualified for that. Now I think San Diego recently got certified, but something that we're pretty proud of. Other things, I've got a bunch of pictures that I'll kind of pick up and incorporate some of these things. Some of the community programs we're involved with the Coastal Cleanup Day. That was a great thing. We got tenants to come out, we got Longshore to come out, and the whole workforce to come out and partner and participate to clean up a lot of the area along Burns Cutoff. And so those are things that I'd see as part of that community group where, we can invite, whether it's Sierra Club or it's with the neighborhood, and start to partner a little bit more and things like that. Up in the top right, you see there's a lot of things that we do out in the community to try to educate. This one happens to be about our barn owl nest boxes. But we really do try to get out and educate people about the port, because one of the worst things that happened was obviously 9/11 was a tragic event for the entire nation, but it also secured ports and airports like we've never seen before. And so even to get in the port, you have to have, you either have to be escorted or you've got to have a transportation worker identification credential. And so it's extremely challenging to be able to bring people in. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we started the boat tours, was because we could show people what was going on from the water without having to go through that process. But a couple quick environmental projects that I'm really proud of and we've been working on really hard. This is Antioch Dunes National Wildlife Refuge. Not the bottom right-hand corner where that sign is, but the two other pictures. And we've partnered with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They came to us asking for sand from the dredging activity. They're trying to rebuild a habitat, a national wildlife refuge for 2 endangered plant species and endangered butterfly from some historic sand dunes that were mined after the 1906 earthquake and fire in San Francisco. All that sand was harvested to make new bricks to rebuild San Francisco. So they've been looking for an affordable opportunity to bring in sand, and so they came to the port, and so we set up this opportunity where, and this isn't something that the port needs. We've got other places to put dredge material, but we're able to, they wanted us to put some material on their site to help rebuild some of these sand dunes. And so we've been doing that for about 5 years, and it's been extremely successful. You can kind of see over on the right-hand side, this is some of the sand that's been put there, and we've since expanded since that operation.
And then Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, if you can wrap up your last couple of slides so we can answer a question or two and then move on to the next item.
Yes, sure.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry to rush you.
Sure, no problem. This is a fish screen that we built. So we try to make sure that we're not impacting fish species while we're dredging. So the material goes through here so we can see what endangered fish are being impacted. Wanted to show briefly some of the stuff that we dredged up from the Navy's occupation of Rough and Ready Island. It was somewhat nasty, and so we were able to remove all of that material out of the waterway. which was a tremendous water quality benefit. One of the cool projects that we work on, we've got 20 barn owl boxes around the port. We've been able to broadcast from inside the boxes during nesting season, which is typically December through around June. So you can visit the port's website to see that. It's very exciting. And then through that, we've been able to go to a lot of the local schools and provide a little bit of history about barn owls and what they eat, and also to share a lot about what the port's doing. Mary Elizabeth mentioned the aerator. We do have an 8,000 pound per day aerator that it was built for the dissolved oxygen issue, but recently we did turn it on to see if we could have an effect on the harmful algal blooms, at least to provide some mixing in the water there. We've planted 165 trees here at the port in the past few years. Sorry for that goofy picture. We've harvested water hyacinth that's out there impacting our waterways and causing navigational issues. That is not water hyacinth. That is actually our neighborhood, our community garden. The port owns that property, and we've provided it to Puentes for, I think, $1 a year for the last at least 10 years, I believe. The Marine Highway project, we were trying to do containers by barge between here and Oakland to try to get trucks off the road and really improve air quality. The port funded this project for 14 months and subsidized it before we couldn't afford to fund it anymore. But that's something that may end up coming back. We hope. It's a good project. We work with an animal rehab. I don't know who wrote all over my slides. And then here's a picture of the port tours that we do in the summer. Hopefully we can get those going again. So upcoming initiatives, we really want to open up lines of communication, and we want to hear from you guys, and we want to have some more interaction, and I'm excited to get to start that, and I'm hoping that we can within the next few months. I'd really like to do it in person, but we may have to start via Zoom, which will just be, it'll be what it is. We're also starting an electric vehicle blueprint grant opportunity through CEC, where I think application is due November 4th. So we're going to really look at different opportunities that we can to look at electrifying additional parts of our cargo handling equipment. We're working on a strategic plan, which we hope will encompass some of these opportunities as well. And we've started just recently a quarterly newsletter to provide updates and things. This is just along with anti-idling signs and others we have around here. One of the things we do care greatly about the Delta, and we do consider it ours to protect. And so I did just want to say in closing that we do want to be good neighbors. It hasn't come across, I don't think, from a lot of the communication we've had so far, but we do want to be able to move goods and reduce impacts to the neighboring community, and want to work with you guys to facilitate that in the future. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you so much for your presentation. I do want to direct you to a number of questions and comments in the chat. And if I can, one thing that I will say is that some of the things that you've said about the port is you are committed to community engagement and really kind of invigorating that process. You've done some, and you have a number of activities currently in progress, but you're looking for additional engagement opportunities, and you will be launching some new ones, and you're looking for support and participation from this group and others that may be relevant from the community. And I'm also seeing in the comments that there is questions about dust, there's questions about the electric fleet, there's questions about, how much training is being given and notification is being given from a public engagement standpoint around certain key decisions. And so if you wouldn't mind, Jeff, I want to direct you to the chat and answer as many of those questions as you can via chat. And then we will maybe make time for one question, but I want to give Rene Gutierrez the opportunity to tell us if he can stay online. We are a little over our time. Rene, are you able to hang out for 5 seconds while we answer one question about the port? Well, he's not on yet, so let's answer a question about the port.
Yes.
So I do see that we did have one hand raised specifically from Douglas. So Douglas, we'll take your question. And then was that you trying to answer?
Yeah, I can wait. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. Just we'll ask Douglas's question, and then you will be up for that very quick update on the Stockton Diamond Separation Project. Douglas, please go ahead and ask your port question.
Yes, thank you for the great presentation, Jeff. Really interesting about it. The only thing I was trying to catch up with my interpreter that if you gave a lot of acronym, like where you threw up, and it kind of left me on question, and all of a sudden you just kind of talk really fast. So I'm kind of, but the thing is that my question was the Hyatt. How often, that's my biggest concern of the smell that I have. I live right by the Delta. If I walk about 2 blocks, I'm right by the Delta. And it stinks when it come over here and I smell the algae, the Hyatt, the green. And, you know, I see people living, they cut the wire from the fence to have access to the Delta already. So it's on Fremont Street, okay? So anyway, how often do you let your maintenance access those type of service that's needed to keep up keep maintaining the city natural beauty of the waterways toward the bridge? Because I know that when it gets kind of really to the point that it's no longer intolerable, then you guys go ahead and just kind of get the machine and get it out there and fix it, you know, and you breathe that and we kind of like that. So that's kind of more important to me for our health. So how often do you have that service going on, and would you have any schedule monthly to oversee that?
Are you talking about the water hyacinth?
Yes.
Yes. I actually, well, Department of Boating and Waterways it's their responsibility to do this, and what they typically do is maintain it by spraying. But it got out of control so bad a number of years ago that they started doing mechanically harvesting, which is not very economically feasible, you know. But what we did was try to provide them with places up and down the ship channel to put the harvested material. But that's not something that we only will get involved if it's really bad, or if we're asked to, or the I got into a little bit of trouble the last time for doing it. So now we have to operate under the permits of Department of Boating and Waterways. So it's not something that we do, and anytime that we do it, we have to coordinate and make sure that we're covered under their permit to be out there in the water and doing it. And thankfully, it hasn't been bad for the last few years. I'm starting to see right now that it is, and actually our pilots have gone to daylight only. So we're very concerned about it. We have calls into Boating and Waterways to see what we can do. And the algae, you know, we'll turn on our aerators whenever we can. We operate them for dissolved oxygen, but if we think that they can help with the algae issue, we'll turn them on as we need.
Thank you so much for that answer, Jeff. And I want to direct you now to a few other questions that are in the chat. If you would be so kind as to answer those questions. And then specifically, there's some good even recommendations as it looks to the kind of the discussion you were having about wanting to have more community engagement. There's some recommendations that might happen, and some potential training that might be available, and or something to consider for your organization. And I do want to move us along, and if you could put any additional questions in the chat. Jeffrey, are you able to stay on the line and answer those on the chat if you see additional ones come through?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Wonderful. Please continue to direct your questions to Jeffrey, but I just want to make sure from a time check standpoint that we get to your CERP, which is a really important part of this CSC. So I do want to turn it over briefly to Renee Gutierrez. Thank you, Renee, for your patience if you can give us a really short primer on the diamond grade separation project, and then we'll jump into CARB and the CERC discussion. Thank you again, Jeffrey, for your comments, and thanks to the committee for the questions.
Yeah, good afternoon, Erica. Thank you. My name is Rene Gutierrez. I'm Associate Planner with the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission. Today, I want to provide a very brief update on the Stockton Diamond grade separation and recent updates. So the environmental review process for the Stockton Diamond grade separation project is now underway. The Rail Commission has officially ended the scoping period for the proposed Stockton Diamond grade separation project. This occurred between August 19th and October 3rd. It was a 45-day scoping period. Now, the Rail Commission is the acting lead agency for CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and the High Speed Rail Authority is a leading agency for the National Environmental Policy Act. Both are under the delegation of the Federal Railroad Administration, which is now going to start preparing the draft environmental impact report and environmental assessment. So a wide range of resources are going to be studied to identify potential effects of the proposed project and establish clear mitigations prior to approval to ensure the project continues forward safely for the community. The Rail Commission will release the draft EIR EA in early winter of 2021. So that's quite some time from now, but time goes by pretty fast, and this process is lengthy, which this report will highlight results of alternatives, analysis, and environmental impacts, and identification of mitigation measures. So a little bit about the project. It's a collaboration between the Rail Commission, private entities of the railways, BNSF, and Union Pacific, as well as regional partners and agencies throughout San Joaquin County. I'm glad to see there's a lot of familiar faces because my role in this project is a lot of stakeholder outreach. So glad to see everybody on, and thank you to everybody that has provided support through our process at the moment. So at the moment, the project is at a concept, and this will separate the two rail lines what is called the rail overbridge at the Stockton Diamond. This rail intersection is located just south of the downtown Stockton, and currently it is the busiest, most congested rail bottleneck in California, resulting in significant congestion and delays to service that moves goods and people throughout the Central Valley, as well as freight to the larger national network, which also, as you heard, connects to the Port of Stockton. So crossing impacts reliability and efficiency of freight and passenger rail. So that affects Amtrak San Joaquin's and NH train service. So train backups also cause local delays at crossings and potential vehicle, rail, bike, and pedestrian conflicts. This project is currently estimated to cost approximately $237 million. Potential project costs will be confirmed through the design, actually undertaken by the Railroad Commission. Funding is anticipated to come from the state, federal, and local resources. Glad and excited to share that in September of 2020, a couple months ago, the project was awarded $20 million from a build grant that is from the United States Department of Transportation, which was one of two awards to the state of California and the only rail project in the US to be selected. We will continue to seek additional state and federal funding and apply for grants as they come available. We have recently submitted a $100 million grant application through the TCEP grant. This is a Trade Corridor Enhancement Program funding through California Senate Bill 1. So the Rail Commission has already secured SB 132 funds, interregional transportation improvement funds to match other project funds. So at the moment, the Railroad Commission will continue to work closely with trusted CBOs and stakeholders in San Joaquin County. And as like Mary Liz mentioned, we have established a stakeholder working group to identify and address project-related issues. To get involved or more information, we have a website. It's at stocktondiamond.com, or you can email me email at info@stocktondiamond.com, or call. We have an information hotline, which is 209-235-0133. Thank you guys for the opportunity. And if all goes well, we'll provide a more lengthy presentation at the next meeting if available.
Renee, thank you so much for that information. Jonathan did put in the link to stocktondiamond.com, but Renee, would you please put your phone number and email address that you mentioned in the chat as well, just to make sure that it stays in the record for us. And then again, Renee is going to come back, or someone from his organization will come back to give a more lengthy presentation about this, and specifically around the timelines that you've identified. It looks like a lot of activity could be happening at the beginning of next year, but we definitely want this group queued up, and they would like to be informed based on what I'm seeing in the chat. There are a number of questions in the chat, Renee, if you wouldn't mind answering those. And if there are any questions for Renee, we've got time for maybe one live question for him if there are any. Otherwise, we'd love to have you put it in the chat so we can go on to move the SERP. I don't see any hands, but I do see some questions directed directly to you, Renee, if you wouldn't mind putting your contact information in the chat for everyone, and then also answering some of the very specific questions. He's already done the contact info, thank you. And then there's some really good questions, I think, about process and opportunity for connection. So thank you so much for staying on the line and doing that for us. Thank you for this preliminary presentation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is actually, I believe, Scott, you're up to talk briefly about regulation timelines related to CARB, and then we're moving into the SERP. And I do want to do a quick time check for everyone. As we suspected, we're going to be running a little bit long. We want to give you guys some time to work on this SERP. So if your schedules allow, we're probably going to ask you to stay on the line for 10 or 15 minutes if we need to cover the SERP, because that is a super important piece of this effort, and we want this meeting to be useful and meaningful for you in this process. So if you are okay with that, we welcome your participation in that extra 15 minutes, but just a heads up that that's what it's looking like right now. Go ahead, Scott, please take it away on the SERP timeline.
Great, just want to make sure you can see my screen.
We can, thank you.
Perfect, thank you so much. Good evening, Scott Wall with the California Air Resources Board. The slides that I'm showing here actually are posted to the Stockton page, so they're already there, access to you. So there's links in here that toward the end that if you'd like to follow those, it's available for you to download from the web page. In the last meeting, basically, we were asked to provide timelines for the CARB regulations that were presented the 2 meetings ago to help you prioritize the SERP measures. And so while I'm not an expert on these regulations, my focus this evening really will be, in the 5 minutes I've got, will be to just look at some timelines and help you understand a little bit more kind of what it takes to get a regulation, a statewide regulation, fully implemented from a time frame perspective. So the question that, as I understand it, is how this committee would like to understand CARB's regulatory timelines, really to help to prioritize the SERP measures. And as you'll see, most of CARB's regulations are focused on a longer term phased in transition, typically over the course of between 15 and 25 years. So this first slide really is looking at the Stockton SERP timeline according to kind of the AB 617 requirements. So 2020, which is where we are now, obviously we've spent kind of the greater part of this year doing the SERP development. And within AB 617, there is a 5-year timeline for implementation. And that would be from 2021 through 2025. And within this 5-year implementation timeline is basically the 5 years to get all of the measures kind of rolled out, implemented. There's annual reports that happen every year, as well as the ability then for the committee and the district to look at adjusting maybe some of the measures within the SERP as time moves on, as technology changes, as the priorities change for the committee. And then the last 5 years within AB 617 is what we call the 5-year look back. And that's basically to make sure that the emission reductions that you've laid out in the measures actually are lasting and that there's no kind of backsliding. So this slide, I won't be covering everything on the slide. Basically, it's a quick snapshot of recent and upcoming regulations. It's important to note that the timeline that we're showing on this slide is when they were approved or will be approved by or considered for approval by our board. It's not the effective date of the regulation. And so we'll kind of dig a little bit more into some of these as we go on, but just kind of wanted to point out the yellow up toward the top, these are all kind of zero emission operation regulations. The ones with check marks are the ones that have already been approved by our board. The ones without check marks are the ones kind of on the near term horizon for consideration. So they're not fully developed yet. And then the lower one are basically same thing. Checks are already in place, not checked are ones that we're kind of creating and going to take before the board. Those are all focused on really reducing the exhaust emissions from the mobile sources. So I don't have time to go into all of these, but we will actually, what I'll do is just so that you have a sense of kind of how these things work. You know, the innovative clean transit as an example. This was approved in 2018. The goal for the innovative clean transit is zero emission fleet transition by 2040. So you can kind of see that's a 20 years from now kind of end goal. With this one, how this works is kind of phasing in starting in 2023, 25% of transit agency new bus purchases must be zero emission. So it doesn't mean that by 2023, 25% of all buses will be zero emission. It basically just means that 25% of new buses purchased must be kind of purchased in 2023. So, and then that phases up to 50% of new buses purchased. And then after 2029 or starting in 2029, 100% of transit agency new bus purchases must be zero emission. So not necessarily meaning that all of these buses are going to be taken off the road by then, but this is really more of a by when they have to start transitioning out their fleet. And it's kind of a little bit of a similar thing on zero emission airport shuttle buses. This was approved in 2019 by our board. This one requires full zero emission fleet transition by 2035. So with this one, again, you'll see the phased in requirements there. But for the zero emission airport shuttle buses, all airport shuttle buses must be 100% zero emission by 2035. And then this is kind of the more recent one approved in June. And this is really a pretty significant regulation for the state of California and really does affect all disadvantaged communities pretty significantly. As you can see on this slide here, the model year, this is it's a regulation that applies to manufacturers of trucks. And so you can see the several different classes of trucks. I've got another slide that I'll show you here in a minute that kind of shows you what these classes of trucks are. But this, excuse me, this transition basically requires that manufacturers sell, so in 2024, as an example, the first line there, 5% of new sales of clean trucks must be zero emission by manufacturers. And you see that that kind of goes increasing percentages all the way down to 2035 and beyond. So there again, it doesn't mean that by 2035, 55% of all trucks will be zero emission. It basically means that 55% of all new truck sales in the state must be zero emission. So this is a manufacturer regulation. And you'll see here that there are different percentages based upon the class of truck. And again, you'll see that kind of goes out to a 15-year timeline, slowly transitioning to zero emission. And these are the types of trucks that we're talking about and kind of the numbers of them that are operating in the state of California. So the smaller kind of trucks and vans you see here, there's a little over 1 million of those. These class 4 through 8 straight trucks and buses, there's 450,000 of those. And the 7 to 8 tractors, there's about 180,000 of those operating. So that's kind of the visual of these different classes that I showed you on the previous slide that have the varying percentages of sales of the model year of the truck over the course of the next 15 years. And the advanced clean fleets, this is another pretty significant regulation that is currently actually under development. This is a zero emission fleet rule. So the last one was actually on manufacturers. This one is going to be on actually the larger fleet owners. And this advanced clean fleets, basically it is going to be focusing on supporting a transition to zero emission where feasible. And the drayage, which is kind of the short run trucks in and out of the ports, public fleets, So like Department of Transportation, all the public agencies that have their own fleets, and the last mile delivery trucks, those will basically transition to zero emission by 2035. Then by 2040, they'll be capturing the garbage trucks, buses, utility fleets like for PG&E. And then by 2045, it'll be for all other trucks and buses, again, where feasible. So the specific details of this regulation are not completely finished, but it would be kind of, again, a gradual transition out to these kind of not timelines of 2035, 2040, and 2045. We're expecting to have a rule recommendation to our board in December of 2021 with implementation starting in 2023. And I know there's been kind of some interest in, well, what really is available out there right now that's commercially available for the zero emission trucks. And I just thought I'd throw this slide out there. It's just so you could see that there really are a decent variety of zero emission trucks of different sizes out there right now. They don't always fit every application, but there are also kind of the major manufacturers are committing to increasing the availability of these over the next few years. So finally, because I wasn't able to really go into detail on the regulations, we do actually have last week, or on the 7th, there was a webinar that CAR produced. It's the 2020 Mobile Strategy. I included a link in the handout to the documents for the mobile source strategy, so you can see the presentation if you really want to get in the weeds. I've also linked in a webinar that we recorded and posted of this mobile source strategy. It's 3 hours, so just so you know before going into it. And again, one more thing I want to share with you is next week we actually do have a presentation or a 2-day workshop on locomotives. I will post the link to that in the chat, just if you're interested in tuning into that. Again, purpose of this is just to really help you understand timeline of our regulations, timeline of the SERP, and hopefully this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will do my best to respond to them.
Thank you so much, Scott. And I think our intent is to make sure that there's clarity on what CARB is doing so that there can be distinction between what needs to be in the SERP for Stockton. And I know Jamie is going to take the next agenda item and take us out actually to the rest of this meeting. She's going to cover the SERP strategies. And a lot of this information is based on what was already sent to this committee, and some feedback's already been provided. Jamie's going to walk you all through this working portion of the meeting that really highlights how you prioritize some of the activities in your SERP. Go ahead, Jamie, you are up. And everyone else, please put questions in the chat for Scott, and he's going to stay online and answer those if he can. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It was important, I think, to have some of these presenters simply because, as many of you mentioned in previous meetings, in previous chats, and then also even in some of the comments that we received to the SERP strategies, that you just needed a little bit more information in some cases. And we probably aren't answering all of the questions you have, but you know, this is a process, and we did want to respond to that desire to hear from the port, to hear from one of our residents, to hear about the Stockton Diamond Grade, and then of course to answer those questions a little bit on timing of regulations. I am going to share with you, first of all, most important thing, I want to thank those of you who turned the survey around. Well, it wasn't really a survey, the worksheets around. I know it's a time crunch and I know you all didn't have time to do it, but that's fine. There's more opportunity for commenting, but we did get a fair number of responses. We had, I think it was 10 residents who responded, and then 3 other folks, 2 advocates and 1 business community representative. So thank you really to the residents who took the time to sit down and put their thoughts on paper. We're going to walk through these just kind of at a really high level. And we are, you know, at the point where we're still taking input. So we had some ideas and they're kind of getting more and more focused and formulated. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start with the incentives. If you recall, there's kind of two sides. The incentives are those items that are big ticket items. We're going to start there. I'm going to share my screen. All right. I'm going to get my fancy spotlight. All right. So this is pretty much a tightened up version of what you saw on that worksheet. I want to point out that there's basically, you know, 3 columns that we want to point out. One is the potential strategy. And in some cases, in many cases, we've begun to update what those say. We've begun to add things here, take things away, you know, really look at the comments that we've gotten back from people to see where there's opportunities to really better flesh these out based on the community needs. I also want to point out that I put, or I should say we put, the comments from your feedback right here in the committee comments. And just there's a little key right here. R means resident. A means advocate, either community or environmental justice. B means business. We didn't get any government feedback yet, so you won't necessarily see that. And chat is maybe a comment that came in a chat way, you know, in the last few meetings. At the end of, well, probably tomorrow, we're going to send these sheets out so you can really dig deep on them. So right now, we're just going to do kind of a high level review on them and talk a little bit about some of the comments that were made. It should come as no surprise that the top incentives, the vegetative barriers and urban greening, both continue to be really popular. High priority, you can see some of the comments there. There is a concern about sustainability, about how we handle these things, but they continue to be a priority. And in both of these instances, based on the feedback, we've increased the dollar amount. Now, I will tell you, while we did get a lot of folks responding to the forms, we didn't get that many folks who actually put in numbers. So we have put in just kind of the next version of this as we begin to investigate a little bit more into what all of these mean. And as I'm going along, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and Ryan or our team will respond. If we don't do it today, we'll circle back around because I will tell you some of these things we need to investigate we need to investigate a little bit more. One of the comments that was made here is with vegetative barriers to put like physical barriers as well. We need to investigate that a little bit more. That can get into some fairly extensive capital costs, and we need to kind of figure out what exactly that means. I'm going to scroll down slowly. The next one I'm going to talk about is current truck routes. People like the idea of truck routes. It's another high priority. And as was mentioned in one of the chat comments today, especially in around the port, as trucks are coming into the port, out of the port, that bogs track area. There's some concerns that have been mentioned numerous times. And no surprise, the feedback we received from the worksheets echoed that as well. School air filtration, that did not go up that much, but I will tell you why. It's because you guys are supportive of school filtration and there's 33 schools and we had already budgeted for all of those 33 schools to get school filtration. Again, another high priority. The next one that we're going to call LU2, it's where my little magic wand is to work with various partners to look for more bicycle infrastructures. And we included bike racks. That was actually a suggestion from the community. But how can we make the communities more biking and also more walk friendly? So this one is a priority. it stayed about the same amount funding wise. And let me see why. Oh, why it's not letting me go to page 2. Oh, there we go. Okay, page 2. Heavy duty truck replacements. This, as you can see, continues to be a high priority. There was some questions about the mix of zero based compared to near zero. You know, does the grid support it? Does the grid not support it? Generally, it got some high marks, and that stayed about the same. We really would be focusing on the zero technology wherever it would be available. Next one is looking at installing electric vehicle chargers. And this one also, I think, maybe bumped up a little bit in popularity over the last couple of weeks. And I think that might have something to do with some of the statements that are coming out of the state with this real push to go to electric, but really looking for where there might be an opportunity to put electric vehicle charging infrastructure in places where the public can easily get to it. Up next, the training for mechanics to work on these vehicles. This was another one that was more popular than I think we originally guessed, because we were guessing. And so that has also been upped quite a bit to really respond to, I think, that nexus that you all were making about that being not only something that's really good for the environment, something that will be increasingly needed, but is also a great job resource for young people in the community. Moving on, older diesel school buses. This one wasn't super popular with you all. There's only about 14 school buses that, when we're talking to Stockton Unified School District, that were really available, that operated in this area, that could be swapped out to an electric school bus. And you all kind of said, you know what, maybe this is a low priority, maybe cut the funding in half, maybe look for ways to maybe spread that money around a little bit. So we took some money out of school buses and moved it. Actually, some of that money got moved up to the top. The larger scale clean fuel infrastructure, these are not the ones that you and I would plug our electric vehicle into. This would be something that maybe an entity that has maybe one of those big electric trucks, or maybe it's a hydrogen vehicle. You know, we need hydrogen infrastructure. So that one really didn't change much. I think there's a need to look a little bit closely. What exactly does that mean? So that's kind of on our short list of things to possibly come back to you all with. This next one, it has lines through it because basically we're gonna take it off the list and focus those monies in other places. We heard from you all that this is expensive, very true. And there's a concern that locomotives, which is what this strategy is about, that locomotives will travel out of the area. So we thought, you know what, sounds great. We'll move that money around to places where it makes more sense for this community. The next one is electric vehicles for the resident. Wasn't a lot of comment about this one. Priority, some people thought it was important, some people thought it was not important. Kind of kept it at the same level. Up next is moving some of those railroad dollars and putting them in the switchers. What's a switcher? Switcher is the piece of big giant machinery. I think it actually looks like a locomotive. The one time I've seen one, it looks to me just like a locomotive. But really what it is a big piece of train equipment that looks like a locomotive that just moves cars around, moves rail cars around. So we actually have some of these operating in the valley, and they, in many cases, can be all electric. So moving those funds from the locomotives into some of the switcher technology, but really focusing on those rail projects that just operate in the community. Up next is just looking at some of the the technology that's behind the transport refrigeration units, the drayage trucks. These are the big mobile trucks that work at the port. There really was kind of a mixed bag about this as well, so we just kept it where it was. Up next was the Tune In, Tune Up program. I think was kind of a little bit of a yes and no on this one too. And just to remind people, because there were some questions about, doesn't this already exist in the community? It does. All this does is allow us to do it more often and actually to investigate some of those suggestions, like here, maybe having some type of an event actually in Boggs Track or in Conway Homes, where folks don't have to actually go to the, I think it's the fairgrounds that you all have these big events at. So this allows us, this doesn't mean that we're doing what we were doing before and we're calling it AB 617. No, this is additional events in the community to do these tune in, tune up replacements. We also heard a couple of comments about, hey, that money may not be enough. We may need for our replacement cash, the amount we give to folks to have their vehicle be repaired. That amount may need to go up a little bit. And we definitely have a plan to allow folks to bring in newer vehicles. In the past, it's been vehicles that are 1999 and older. One of the comments you'll see on the spreadsheet is to allow newer cars. And we are looking to allow, I say newer, they're still, you know, cars that are, you know, 16, 18 years old, but we're gonna allow a little more flexibility with that. I know one of the previous meetings, there was a little bit of a back and forth because there's still a lot of those older dirty vehicles out there, but we do know that there's a desire to help those community residents that maybe have a car that was new in 2001 and they really do need to get it repaired because it's having trouble passing smog. This electric car share program, we have a couple of pilot programs that are running in other parts of the valley, and there was a little bit of a confusion. What does this mean? What this is in the I think it's 2 other locations where we've done this. We partner with a nonprofit. That nonprofit purchases electric vehicles. Those electric vehicles are available for folks in the community to basically rent. But I say rent in a really loose term because it's not like going to Hertz or Enterprise and renting a car. What it is that you go to an app and you can basically reserve one of these cars to rent for as low as like $6 an hour or 20-something a day. It's a really inexpensive way through this nonprofit partner to have folks be able to use electric vehicles that are parked in their community, that are charging in their community, to be able to run errands they might need, to go to a doctor's appointment that they might have. There are a few requirements. You, of course, have to have a driver's license in order to do this, but it's really investigating the potential of launching one of these in one of the communities. I know in Conway Homes, the Housing Authority has an office there and some parking spots there. So this one is looking at how we can do that in the Stockton community. And this one, maybe you all want more money in it. I did think that folks maybe needed a little bit better explanation of what it exactly meant. But again, this is just version 2 of what might be a multi-version spreadsheet or document. Up next, incentive program for tugboat replace and repower. Some of that was addressed a little bit by the port and by some of the deadlines that are coming up, but this didn't really change. We had a little bit of a mixed bag of highs and lows here. Up next, the program for replacing your wood burning stove. That one, kind of a mixed bag as well, not a lot of comments. We kept it where it was. The incentive program to bring an electric bike share program. Again, kind of a mixed bag. Some people were supportive, some not, so we've left that where it is. The replacement of commercial lawn and garden equipment. There were a lot of folks that felt like that may not exactly work for our community. The questions about whether or not it stays within the boundary. We actually took that one down a little bit. And then the incentive program for residential, and it looks like that one, yes, sorry, I thought I was on the wrong line, was also a little bit of a mixed bag. So that one came down a little bit as well. There was a new idea, which not a lot of people were able to comment on because it was a brand new one, called the Marine Exhaust Intake Bonnet Emission Controls. We've left that at what it was, but we can change that. Another brand new one, which had lots of support, was to look at air filtration in homes. And we haven't fully thought this one through. Like I said, we just found out that this was something that was of interest to this community last week, but we're beginning to think it through. What would that mean? We'd love your feedback. Is this giving people filters? Is this giving people, you know, a standalone like air purifier? So we'd love your feedback on air filters for homes, but we put a line in there for it, and we'll begin to flesh that one out a little bit more. That's the incentives. And again, I will share this with you. We'll email it out to everyone and we'll put it on the website. I also wanted to mention the original SurveyMonkey data is on the website on the Stockton page now. The worksheet that we sent out week before last, that's now on the website in the document section, and we will post these documents to the document section. We just want to continue to have a record of the input that we got from the committee and the different versions of this that we're developing. All right, up next, thanks for keeping with me. I'm going to speed up just a little bit because I don't have to talk about dollar amounts here. Remember, this is the one that's not a big check. It's more of a staff time, collaboration, coordination, working with different partners. And I will say some of this you guys will need, it's another homework assignment. You'll need to go in and look at the documents and read through, because I won't have time to go through all of these. We had a lot more comments on this side of the table or the worksheet than we did on the incentive side. So the first one was increasing inspection frequency for permitted stationary sources. Lots of potential, lots of support for this one, and lots of questions that we're beginning to dig into about what does that exactly mean? What does that mean, and can we prioritize how we do this and do it even more frequently? And you'll see some repetition here between some of the comments, and that's fine. We appreciate that folks work together. We love that. If you guys want to get together and do a group project, so we're supportive of that. But just know that if 3 residents put in the same comment, I did put it in 3 times so that we could know that, hey, we had 3 residents that participated and kind of agreed these were priorities for them. The next is about facility risks, and specifically what was listed here is a facility risk at some named businesses, industries within the community. And so we're going to incorporate some of that actual listing of some of those sources as we flesh this out a little bit more. My favorite, you guys like outreach. We will, as we implement this thing, be coming to you on a regular basis with ideas for outreach. Just so you know, I've been working with Fresno and Shafter about everything as mundane as what should billboards look like. So that will come back around to you. Those are both kind of the outreach ones here. My wand won't make it go to the next page. First of all, I want to apologize that we used the term Reg 8. We weren't thinking, so I apologize. I don't know how anyone would know what Reg 8 meant. That was our bad. But we've made some edits here. It's basically dust. So if you're on a construction site, or if you're somewhere and someone's kicking up a lot of dust, there's a regulation for that. So it's really looking at how we can make sure that that dust is mitigated as much as possible. We've cleaned that up. We're not going to use acronyms. We're going to try not to use acronyms. Some of these are enhanced enforcements, and some of the with CARB regulations, and some of them are actually with district regulations. And so we hear that these continue to be a priority, enforcement, and we have built out a little bit more of what these measures, how they read. So as you look through this in the next week or so, you can dig in a little bit, and hopefully we're a little bit clearer. This next one, that wonderful term barked, it's basically looking at our regulations and saying, hey, can they be tighter? We want to make them tighter. So that's a high priority for this group, and it of course is still there. One of the things that was interesting is that enhanced enforcement for folks who are maybe burning their fireplace on a night when they shouldn't be, not a lot of support for enforcing on that end, more support for education. And we've heard that, and we really are going to be mindful of that and see how, I think this one actually will get rolled into more of an outreach one rather than an enforcement one. Doesn't mean we won't do enforcement. It just means we won't turn the volume up on enforcement. Oh, and I skipped them. So I just, the residential wood burning is this one that my magic wand's on. This one above it is residential waste. This is the burning when people have maybe a burn barrel in their backyard and they're burning their trash, or maybe they have a cooking fire that's out of control. Both of these really, you wanted a lighter touch here, and you wanted it to be more about education, and we heard that. All right. Did I get it wrong again? Hold on. Yeah, sorry. So this next one is about, let's do education and not enforcement. Let's encourage people to understand why burning's bad instead of giving them a ticket for it. The next one that received some mixed reviews is that we would work with partner agencies such as the COG, such as the city, such as the county, to look for and advocate those plans, those strategies, those regulations that really look for ways to reduce the amount of driving people have. This is another one of those ones that kind of have tepid response for, so we'll dig in a little bit more, see if there's not a way that we can either make this clearer, or you know, if you guys want to change it into something else, we can totally do that. The next one, work with the city of Stockton about the concern about outdoor cooking emissions. Not a lot of support for this one. You know, there's, I think, a concern about going after small businesses, that type of thing. So this one needs some more thought as well. New pilot training program for self-inspection at gas stations. Again, not a huge amount of support for this one. We'll flesh it out a little bit more, hear from you all, see if it's something you want to continue to prioritize. Finally, we had 3 brand new ones that kind of sprouted out of suggestions through this process. The first one is to really look at an integrative planning process. What does that mean? We can break this out a little bit more, but I want to get done so you guys can comment. It basically is making sure that as you're planning for how your city's going to grow, how your city's going to develop, how your city's going to change, you look at it in a way that really is holistically, that takes into account health, that takes into account transportation, that takes into account long-term impacts, and how you can start to buffer those heavy uses in your community in a variety of different ways. This was something that folks, I think, are interested in. I think we just need to develop it a little bit more and make it a little bit clear what exactly would this mean. Another one that's a very high priority is looking at the algae blooms and seeing, is there ways that we can help advocate for operations or procedures that will minimize the effect of algae blooms. And then the last one is to work with Stockton Unified on emission-free zones. So really it's about outreach and education to get schools to be emission-free zones. So let's make sure folks aren't idling. Let's make sure the trucks aren't going right by there. Let's work on ways to educate the student population and those around to have these emission-free zones. So that's the feedback, very broadly, that we got through the survey. So what's next? We have a couple of questions for you all. Well, they're not really questions, but before we go into kind of what's next, maybe we'll see if I can open it up to some questions and see what you all have to say. It's a lot, I know.
I think, Jonathan Pruitt, Catholic Charities, I think it's probably good to make sure everyone, all the different entities that are already doing or have some sort of idea of the projects that are hopefully trying to get funded for, so there's no need to utilize funding of AB 617 and utilize whatever the funding that they're looking for, and also look at, you know, what CARB's going to do with trying to provide those funding sources, or what funding sources are available, and how are some ways where like the port or even the trucking companies could be competitive, because I'm sure it's probably competitive to even apply for them, but there needs to be a way where CARB also provides some leeway for the port to apply for these grants instead of, you know, AB 617 funding all the way, because it is a huge bulk of the funding that I don't want to be taken from that just for port or any of that. There needs to be other forms of issues or other forms of projects that the community definitely needs. And I definitely agree with the air filtration systems for schools is definitely huge. There's really no need for the school buses. They don't travel as much throughout the day. They're not ones that, you know, they only do in the daytime and the afternoons. And they don't travel as far. I mean, the Stockton Unified School District's locations for the buses are, isn't it near in South Stockton off of close to Fresno Avenue, next to the port, actually. I think it's the parking lot is near the Port of Stockton. So it's not a far reach for causing emissions. That's all I have.
Hey, real quick on just some of the things, Jonathan, you touched on. Yeah, there are definitely existing programs for replacement of some of the heavy duty trucks. It is a program that typically is very oversubscribed in the way that the state program runs. It is a first come, first serve. And so there really wouldn't be an opportunity for, you know, specific sites to get preference for the state funding under that. And, you know, with AB 617 funding, that is something that we can prioritize, or the, you know, not us, but the steering committee can prioritize and, you know, get those replaced without having to wait in that queue, in which case they may not ever be replaced. So I think that is an important distinction for the steering committee to think about. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Can I ask a question? This is Debbie Provost. I was wondering, aren't the buses privately owned?
The school buses are not. The school buses are owned by Stockton Unified School District.
Okay, so then the drivers are paid by a private company.
It's my understanding that they're paid by Stockton Unified School District, but there might be that's at least how it is in our other communities, but maybe there's some different. And I don't know if anyone has exact knowledge of this. Chime in.
I have a neighbor that is a school bus driver. She gets paid by a private company, so that's why maybe we need to check into that a little bit more.
Well, we do know that for certain that the school buses are owned by Stockton Unified. Okay. We talked to them about it. Now they may go through a third party to kind of run their driver program. That wouldn't surprise me if they did that.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to add to that, on very rare occasions, you'll have a third party who will pay the school district to take youth on field trips, but that's very rare.
That's a good point, Nicholas. Yeah, I kind of recall that from the eons ago that I was in school.
Hi, this is Hannah. Eric, I think your audio is off because I can see you trying to talk.
It is.
But I'm not hear you.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. I just noticed I was double muted. I did want to acknowledge Willie's had his hand up and I wanted to make sure he had the chance to ask a question. Willie, did you want to ask a question about the SERP?
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So I had a question and a follow-up question. So in terms of the list of initiatives, first of all, it's kind of it's listed as a result of, I guess, the CARB team brainstorming ideas as well as community recommendations. Is that correct, Jamie?
The strategies come from kind of 3 different places. The first thing is comments that we've gotten from the Community Steering Committee. There are several strategies on here that are brand new that come straight from you guys. The second thing is some of the ones that both CARB and the Air District have brought to the table because they have the biggest emissions reduction. They actually take emissions out of the air. And then the last point is things that we've seen in other communities, not just in other Valley communities, but there are some of these that are from other AB 617 communities outside of the Valley.
Got it. Thanks, Jamie, for the clarification. In terms of my follow-up question, I can't speak for the entire group. I'll definitely speak to my own experience, but in terms of the enforcement measures, I do want to call out that my decision to choose and give comments and support or take away support from certain initiatives came largely to the unintended consequences it has to the demographics that this population serves. Obviously, it's outside Stockton. If you look at the demographics, it's largely working class, largely people of color. So with that in mind, a lot of those enforcement tactics have a unintended consequence and I guess, an impartial impact to some of the people who come from those types of backgrounds who more of that enforcement might actually cause more policing of our people of color or low income people, which we don't want to see for people who are trying to make ends meet, but are definitely trying to not be a substantial contributor to the air pollution, but are kind of fighting to survive in some sense. So in terms of my decision to add support, or my approach was to focus on industrial sources, to focus on commercial sources, not the ones that police, whether you have a whether you're using your fireplace or if you have a I forget what you referred, the term was, Jamie, where you have a canister in your backyard where you're burning things, because again, that's going to disproportionately affect our community in that sense.
I agree. We heard that. Sorry, Willie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it was so it's not exactly a question, it's just a comment.
Yeah, well, you do bring up a good point. I think, part of that, those similar type of concerns got brought up when similar measures were included in Shafter and Fresno. And, even though we may take enforcement action, we also look at those as opportunities to provide the education and the compliance assistance to reduce, or in some cases, eliminate penalties. But understanding that in these situations, what we've seen, people burning their trash, people are burning in their fireplaces. Those are definitely localized impacts to the communities. And so getting people to change the behaviors, and Jamie touched on the outreach and increasing that. And I think that's a fantastic option as well. But just kind of give the background on maybe why South Central, Fresno, and Shafter, with maybe those same concerns, still did include those type of measures. But really appreciate your feedback and your thoughts on that. Great perspective.
Yeah, and I also saw, I see Jonathan about, can we change the language? Definitely. And some of this is language that we will be changing 100%, and we continue to hear you. I did want to make a comment. I see there's still lots of comments about the port, and it looks like Jeff has jumped off, but we will get the chat to Jeff and see if he won't put some answers together in writing for everyone to some of these questions. I see some of them have even been asked more than once, so we see that. I will tell you, we've gotten into the habit, just as a reminder, the chat as you see it gets posted on the website, usually within 24 hours of the meeting. So by Thursday morning, hopefully you'll see that if you want to go back and look. We also look through it usually the next day or the day after, just to see if there's anything we need to follow up on. So feel free to go and check that out. The other thing, kind of next step, well, are there more questions or comments?
I'm not seeing any hands. Feel free to raise your blue hand or unmute yourselves if that's easier. Since we're wrapping up this item, we want to make sure you get the chance to weigh in. There's lots of comments, and we're grateful for those in the chat, when those will be reflected as well. I don't see any hands in terms of verbal comments. So do you want to continue, Jamie? And then if there's anything that jumps out, we'll talk about it.
I will. So what's next steps? So we're going to continue to, I know, give you all homework assignments. So what we're going to do is we're going to send these 2 spreadsheets that I presented today. We're going to send them out again tomorrow or Thursday at the latest. And we're going to ask for even more comments back. We're going to, are there things that you see that we want to change? In some cases, before we send them out, we may even update some of the language based on the conversation tonight. I hear and read a lot about, you know, the enforcement versus education. We're going to roll some of those comments in before we send them out. But if you all can have another look at it, send it back to us by, I'm so confused on timing, you guys. Did they mention it's my birthday? I actually, and people were giving me a really hard time that I was spending my birthday with you all, but I have to say, I kind of like you guys. Let's go with next round of feedback. Can you all give me your next round of feedback on October 30? So
that's in 10 days, October 30th.
Yeah. And if you can send us an email. You can call me up. You can call Ryan up. You can, however you want to comment to us on this, we welcome your comments. But if you can give us your next round of feedback on the 30th, we then hope to incorporate all of that together so that when we meet on November 4th, is that right?
Correct.
Yes, November 4th. We can have yet another version of this for you. We're slowly going to morph this away from a spreadsheet and into strategies as how they might read in the SERP. So that's coming, but we want to get additional feedback from you all. Looks like there's a couple.
Jonathan has a question.
Yes.
During the implementation phase, I know you guys, Valley Air District's going to have a lot I'm hoping the addition to another community for year 3 comes in. With that in mind, and with, of course, with the other 2 implementation committees already, Fresno and Schaffner, are there ways where, Valley Air District internally is trying to figure out on a actual point person strictly for certain communities, to where it breaks off into, say, like Fresno and Stockton, and then someone from Schaffner and the other community, just so we have a quick turnaround. Zong has been very good with it, but for me, I'd also like to have a straight point person, similar to like how CARB works, where they have a point person. And I think the reason why is just so when it comes to, providing follow-ups on things, and then if we need to have meetings, it would help. I don't know. I mean, that was somewhat of a question before, in the last meeting if there were any thoughts of having like an actual point person.
Yeah, to answer your question right now, yeah, you know, if they're right now, the point people for the program are Jamie, myself, and then Jessica Olson, and then Jason Lawler has assumed that role in her stead. If we do get another community, there are definitely discussions happening here on how we would go about splitting this up. As it gets bigger, yeah, we definitely see the need of having specific people assigned to different things. So,
Yeah.
but for the time being, yeah, the point people, if you have any questions about whether we should have meetings, getting in touch with anybody.
And just to piggyback, I will say it's a balancing act. I personally, being like, there is lots to be learned from all three communities, and being able to know what's going on in all three is incredibly valuable. We actually tried to have different point people just from a logistical standpoint, and it just oddly is more efficient for Zong to do all three. But at some point, it's going to be challenging. But I can tell you, and don't share this with anyone else, but we'll cut back on Fresno and Shafter before we cut back on work with you. You guys are more important to us right now than they are. But don't let them know that I said that.
Everybody.
Unofficial. I do see that Douglas has a question. Douglas, did you want to ask?
Yes, I did some clarification. On the 30th, you said you want to have comment. Is that going to be a meeting coming up for everybody to come to make a comment, or do you want it in email to you about today commenting? And also, I don't even understand what you were referring to as far as three different community. As far as, are you talking about residents and organization and government? How do you language? You say languages are meaning important from each other or not? I was a little confused about that. What you just said.
Douglas, we have in the San Joaquin Valley 3 AB 617 communities: the community of Stockton, the community of Fresno, and the community of Shafter, which is a little town near Bakersfield. So when we talk about our 3 communities, that means that a lot of the air district folks and some of the CARB folks that are here, we also are meeting with those communities on a regular basis. So Jonathan is correct in that it is a lot of work for those of us who are going to all 3 meetings. There is even a chance that we will get a 4th community at the end of this year. That means we would have 4 communities that we would be meeting with. So we will have to reassess how we do things. The second question you asked is, what kind of comments do you need? We will not have another meeting until November 4th. However, we will be emailing everyone either tomorrow or Thursday with an assignment, and that assignment will be for you to review in detail what was presented tonight, and then you can email us, you can call us, you can write us a letter, you can text us, you can comment however you would like, but we'd like those comments back by October 30th.
Great, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Question.
Thank you.
And Dylan?
Yeah, I was wondering, would it be possible, like regarding enforcement, I noticed that you said that the Air District and the Port of Stockton would work together at trying to figure out kind of that stuff, or I forgot if it was enforcement or incentives or whatever it was, but it feels pretty disingenuous to be here and not be able to answer our questions, right? As a committee, like we're here at the table trying to make a difference for the residents of Stockton and South Stockton. And if folks don't want to be held accountable to all the data, right? Like there's not, I don't think there was anything that was not factual that was said on the chat. Why, and they won't answer our questions. Like, why would that transaction only take place between the Air District and the Port of Stockton? That kind of takes us out of the equation. So
we're going to talk to the Port of Stockton about why they left the meeting. That's the conversation we're going to have with them.
Yeah, but I mean, also I'm talking about enforcement. Can we have specific rules about enforcement specific to the Port of Stockton?
Yeah. So let me answer that one, Dylan. So in the strategies that were sent to everybody, it does include specific ARB enforcement of measures, including the district like doing things like the idling vehicles and stuff of that nature. But there are specific enforcement measures included in there that are related to the Air Resources Board's regulations that deal with equipment, ships, that they have committed to enforcing at the port as part of the AB 617 effort.
So it's not the jurisdiction of the Air District, it's going to be CARB or some other agency enforcing the port.
Correct. And then obviously there was additional measures for stationary sources with emissions violations that the district is proposing to do additional inspections of those sources. So we would double, so if we found an emissions violation in any stationary source within the AB 617 community, what the district would commit to do would be to do 2 inspections of that source for 4 consecutive inspections, or 5 years, whichever's whatever's earliest.
So 2 things I heard. One is that the Air District's going to follow up on the questions that were not answered today in the meeting today and in the chat today, because there were a couple that did not get answered before Jeff had to take off. And so we're going to connect with him about those questions and try and get those answers to you. Separately, in the SERP, there will be distinct measures that CARB has to enforce related to the port and that the Air District needs to enforce related to the port. And specifically, things that you can build into your SERP that tie to the port. So there's a couple different opportunities tied to the port where there are opportunities for not only connecting back with them, but then also some enforcement and regulation requirements. Did I get that right, Ryan?
Yeah.
Great. Did that answer your question, Dylan?
I think so. I just would like to have some type of thing that represents a relationship, or this lack of a relationship that's always existed between port communities in Stockton and the Port of Stockton. Yeah. They are the largest polluter in the area. So it's not, I'm not just like a hater, I'm just following the data.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that, Dylan. And I mean, I'd encourage everybody. So Jeff did drop in, to email him to be part of the community group that they are going to be engaging on, various things that the port is doing. Our team will definitely follow up with the port and find out about the things. And, if the committee thinks that it's something that needs to be brought up at the next meeting, that's what we could ask them to do, as opposed to just us relaying the responses. We'll take that feedback.
It sounds like we are hearing that that is something that the committee may want to do. We've also heard that the committee may want to independently identify a person, a resident, to participate in that Stockton Port Community Engagement Committee, and to engage in that and report back as appropriate to this group, maybe unofficially, but with that in mind. So a number of questions in the chat, and I do want to do a time check. If people are able to stay on the line, we're happy to continue the conversation till 7:30, but I do want to be mindful that there are a number of questions in the chat, and we've seen that Dylan's questions to be answered by the port at the next meeting in November, so that's duly noted. Questions about the port commissioners and their training also duly noted and will be reflected in the comments to the port. And then there's a note that from Mary Elizabeth answering some questions. So we do see a number of port questions, specifically because there was a lot of conversation in the chat, and then obviously the presentation today. We do want to talk about the SERP though. I know that's so important to you all. we didn't want to give it short shrift. I want to get a time check and a pulse check from everyone. Do you feel like you've gotten enough information on the SERP? You've talked enough about that with everybody on the line with regard to the SERP, so that we can then take the remainder of the homework is going to be really about getting the port questions answered and connecting those dots at the next meeting. Are we feeling good about the SERP and what Jamie's presented and what you're going to get in the email from her on Wednesday or Thursday that you need to reply back to on 10:30? Does everybody feel pretty good about what you need to do and information you'd like to provide? Looks like we've got thumbs up. I'm seeing thumbs up, reactions, great. So look for those emails from Jamie. Questions can be directed to her directly, can be directed to the Air District AB 617 email address. Please continue to work along those processes. There were a couple questions in here as well about the benefit of enforcement versus education and outreach. You guys will have to have those conversations amongst yourselves about what your prioritization is. There's good points by your committee members on both sides of that discussion. So please do look at that. And then the follow-up needs to be, it looks like the follow-up needs to happen as it relates to the port. So we're going to do two concurrent efforts to keep this moving forward. One is on the SERP, and that's a big priority for everyone. The other is on the port. It connects the dots, but there's slightly different efforts, and the Air District's going to try and be the liaison to get some additional information from that source. With that in mind, it's 7:24. I want to thank everybody for their extra time today. We want to go ahead and close this up by 7:30, so we're going to proceed with the rest of the agenda. Please continue dropping information in the chat, and again, the Air District will review that, so it's all part of the record, and we're grateful to you for your flexibility and your willingness to write this all down. Moving on to the next pieces, we just want to wrap up. There are a number of things that I think we flagged for you. The deadline for SERP responses and updates and feedback is October 30th. That's next week, next Friday, and that needs to go to the Air District. This is an AB 617 resident stipend eligible meeting. So those of you that signed on to that program will be reimbursed for this meeting. We'll be issuing those checks later this week. There are a couple of you that need to get W-9s in, and a lot of them are in the mail. I know, Douglas, yours, it doesn't sound like made it to you yet. We have a tickler in your file to make sure that you get that back to us, but we do know that you're in progress. Anybody else that wants to participate in the program, send that information in right away. We are going to be processing checks this week for the October meetings to make sure that even this one is included. Any other comments before we go to public comment? Any other thoughts from this committee before we move to public comment?
Hey, Erica, real quick, just wanted to kind of like our next step as far as the measures, not wanting to just continue to discuss them and take surveys, but actually wanted to move forward with them. What we were thinking that we would do and wanted to, kind of have initial discussions with the committee just so they can think about it, would be to, at some point, vote on the measures, with the steering committee members, and use that as, kind of determining which measures to include and potentially, and the funding amounts for the individual measures. So if everybody could think about that, and if you have any thoughts or comments about that, please feel free to email or call any of us.
It looks like Jonathan says we would think on that.
Yeah, realistically, we would need 2 more meetings on that. And I do know November, it is a holiday towards the end of it. Like, what is it, the Thursday of the end of the thing? And I know you guys have the other 2 communities to deal with, but I also want to make sure we go to each and every one of them and say vote in or vote out, because that's what it would take.
Agreed, 100% with you, Jonathan, on that. But just wanted to make sure that people were okay with the concept of voting on the measures to move them forward.
Looks like we've got some heads nodded. I think there is consensus. It looks like with the head nods that I'm seeing and the thumbs ups is that we would be able to and should be able to. We just need to talk through the logistics of how that might work and the timing for how that might work. So it looks like the committee is supportive of that effort. given that there's enough time to really go through each measure.
This
Okay.
is Margot Kraus. Could I just say, I think there needs to be time where we can put comments in about the different things too. People might be voting something out and someone might have some insights as to why maybe that should stay in. So plenty of time is needed.
Thanks, Margot.
That's a good point.
Yes, we do. We have, just FYI, done a couple of committee meetings where we've had, they're very long meetings, but where you can do a combination of voting and then also kind of commenting on each item. It does take time, but it's definitely productive. And if the committee identifies the priorities, there's certainly ways to do that, even via Zoom. Any other parting thoughts, public comments? All right, do we have any public comment, Heather?
We do not.
Excellent. We do not. As mentioned a number of times, our next meeting is on November 4th. And so at that meeting, we know that we will definitely have the incorporated feedback from the SERP updates that you all will be reviewing this week and next and providing to the Air District. There may be additional port updates based on the dialogue today, the chat today, the outstanding questions from today. And then I know that a number of you meet and talk about agenda items in advance of the meetings. And so those will also be incorporated, those feedback and those recommendations may also be incorporated into the meetings. And we have seen and heard that we want to allow enough time for discussion, deliberation. So that will be built into this discussion moving forward as well. So thank you all for your patience today and for the extra 30 minutes. Any parting thoughts before we adjourn?
Yes, I do.
Mary Elizabeth, yes, our community co-host, please do.
Yeah, so you've summed everything up greatly, but I would like to thank Jamie, and I think that we can make this a really memorable occasion for her if we all took our mute off and sang a happy birthday.
Oh,
I love it.
All right. So what do we got? Everybody want to unmute and
Great idea.
Let's
There
do
we go.
it.
Yay.
All right. Ready, begin.
Happy
birthday
to you.
Happy
birthday
to you. Happy birthday, dear Jamie. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Birthday ever.
Wow, that was perfect, Mary Elizabeth. Thank you. The best way to adjourn a meeting, and fitting that our community co-host took us out. Thank you so much, Mary Elizabeth, for all your volunteering and for your presentation.
Thank you.
Jamie, happy birthday.
Thank you all. Have a lovely evening.
Thank
You too.
Bye.
Hey, Hannah, can you keep the line open, please?
Yes, of course.
So
Heather,
go
I'm
ahead and turn off the Facebook.
Okay, let me stop recording and I'm gonna pass it to turn off the Facebook.
Can you make sure that